From what most are used to seeing when they come here to a council meeting. So even though this really is a council meeting, it's more of a workshop. So we're still going to call the meeting to order so that all council members are present, with the exception of Councilmember Koval, who is not able to make it with us today. And we have on the agenda public comment, and we'll take some public comment up front. However, as we go through this exercise today, if anyone from the audience has an idea or a thought about what's being said, submit a speaker slip and we'll take some more comment towards the end or wherever we need to, because we want to make sure that everybody's heard, and if there's good ideas, we want to hear the good ideas also. So does the council think that's a good idea? Or? All right.
Mayor says so, it must be.
All right, we'll make that happen then. And so let's go ahead and begin the revenue workshop. And who's speaking first?
We have one public speaker, Janet Garvin.
All right, thank you, Jen. Come on up.
I would like to reserve my comment to the end.
Okay, that's fine. She's going to speak a little bit
You
later.
have exited the judgments and your location is disarmed.
And you know what, even though it's a little bit less formal today, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and have everyone that wants to speak come up to the lectern and use the microphone. That way everything gets on the record and is heard, and if we have to, we can review the tape recording later on to make sure everything is recorded properly and don't miss anything. Okay. Your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Is this thing on?
Yes.
Yes. Can y'all hear me? Is everybody awake? You can all wave. It's okay. Just checking. This is a workshop, folks. It's not formal, but we do want to make sure everybody knows what's going on.
Please turn off your cell phones, please.
Okay. Better? There we go. So, ladies and gentlemen of the council, as well as those here in the room, at the City Council's workshop this past March, the council did determine that they wanted to have a workshop to look at the fiscal stability of the city, both short and long term. It's a positive step for the city, just as any other community. You may have read a number of articles that various cities throughout San Diego County are doing the same thing right now. Currently, you'll see the presentation. The city is fiscally solid right at this point in time, and we should be for a couple of years going down into the future. Beyond that, nobody knows in a crystal ball what the world will bring, but we want to plan ahead. We want to make positive decisions that put the city in the best light possible, and this is an opportunity for the City Council to hear information about our revenue streams, options for increasing, modifying, changing those if necessary, and to provide some alternatives for the staff to start working on going forward into the future to make sure that we all stay in a positive mode. And to that end, our finance director and finance manager have prepared a great presentation that I think is very informative for both the council and the community, and I'm going to turn it over to Tim McDermott.
Thank you, Marlene. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, Mayor Minto, council members, community members, city staff. On the screen before you is the agenda for our conversation today. I'd like to start with providing a financial status update. It's been 7 months since we adopted the current fiscal year budget, so we're past due for discussion about how things look here fiscally. After that, we'll talk about some public facility needs, provide a brief history on some of the actions the city has taken over the past couple of decades to keep things positive fiscally. We'll talk about a variety of options for enhancing revenues, those that the city has more direct control over, those that would require voter approval. We're kind of throwing a lot of things out there. Some of them probably don't make sense, but there are things that are out there in the world of municipal finance that other public agencies utilize to help fund their operations and infrastructure needs. We've included some things in here.
Can I interrupt just a second?
Yes.
As you go through this, if there's some kind of acronym or jargon, can you make sure everybody understands what that is?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Try to keep it non-technical, but straightforward as possible. And of course, we're looking for the council's input throughout the presentation. As you mentioned, this is a workshop, so we're looking for a dialogue. We're looking to hear from you every step of the way. And by the end of the afternoon, hopefully we have an idea of what next steps or future steps staff should be taking. So looking at the year that was, fiscal year 18-19, got some very good news regarding last fiscal year. So we ended last fiscal year with a reserve, an available reserve balance of $11.7 million. It's actually a $1.8 million improvement over where we expected to end the year when the budget was developed in spring of 2019. The primary reasons for that additional bottom line, if you will, sales tax revenues were definitely stronger than expected. County pool allocations, online sales, out-of-state sales that come through the county pool were definitely stronger than expected. In addition, one of our principal sales tax generators in particular has performed extremely well over the past couple of years and has provided some strong revenues for the city. Our planning and engineering revenues from land development activities were stronger than expected. Really across the board, the revenues, virtually all revenue items were, they came in as expected or slightly better than projected. In addition, last fiscal year, we did have quite a bit of expenditure savings. There were a handful of vacant positions in the organization that are currently being filled. That contributed to some expenditure savings. In particular, the fire department had some non-personnel cost savings. Our community services department had some personnel costs and some operational cost savings that contributed, all of the above contributed to the $1.8 million in additional resources available coming out of last fiscal year. And the good news is much of that does continue to impact us as we go forward into the current fiscal year. So looking at the current fiscal year, we're seeing continued strength in sales tax. At this point, due to the delay in information through the state to the local jurisdictions, we only have one full quarter's worth of data, but it's a strong quarter. I actually hope to get the reports. I got the reports on Friday of last week. They'll be going out to the council here. I'll get them out this evening before, so you have them here this week. Sales tax revenues are continuing to be strong, again in the building and construction category and the county pool allocations. One of the positive outcomes of what we're starting to see is additional revenue come through from out-of-state online retail sales. It's an impact of the Wayfair court decision. Those revenues are starting to actually be realized. Property taxes were stronger than expected. When we developed the budget, we anticipated about a 6.5% increase in assessed valuation here in Santee in the current fiscal year. The good news is that actually it's 7.7% of an increase, again adding to the city's revenues from the current year. This is the third year in a row that Santee has been in the top 5 in the county of all cities as far as the growth in assessed valuation from one year to the next. It's a function of, we can see around the community what's going on with residential and some other developments. Of course, it's a reflection of the overall strong economic conditions, low unemployment, good wage growth. Overall economic conditions are solid right now. Okay, so what you're seeing now is a 5-year look down the road. What this does is it starts with the adopted budget, makes some adjustments for the things that we actually know at this point in time, make some projections going forward for the rest of the fiscal year. Just want to point out that we'll be bringing the actual mid-year budget adjustments for the current fiscal year to the city council in about a month. So the numbers, when we bring that forward, may not exactly align with this. This is our best look at this point in time. So I'd like to point out, starting with the first column on the left for the current fiscal year, that the revised column there, if you go about halfway down the screen, you're going to see a number of revenues over under expenditures and transfers out. That number reflects a negative, but I want to remind the council that when we adopted the budget, we had a planned use of supplemental reserves in excess of $800,000. So when we built the budget, that number would have been in excess of $800,000 using reserves that had already been there, supplemental reserves. The number is now negative 120, which is a reflection of the additional revenues that we're looking at in the current fiscal year. At the end of the current fiscal year, we're looking at a reserve balance of about 26% of general fund expenditures, which is about 6% greater than the reserve policy level of 20%. Would be about $2.6 million in additional reserves beyond the base reserve level. We'll engage you in a more thorough discussion on those reserves with the mid-year budget and have some suggestions on what to do with those reserves or how to structure those reserves. Going forward, let me point out the first two lines, the revenues and the operating expenditure lines. You notice the percentage change going forward. Next year, we're looking at operating expenditures anticipated to outgrow the growth in revenues, continuing each year as we go down into the future. Next year still does look good, though. If you look at the second column, the FY 2021 projected, we're looking at operating revenues over expenditures of about $1.3 million. Once we fund the transfers and other uses, and let me briefly mention what's included in that number. That includes transfers into the capital improvement program based on the adopted 5-year capital improvement program that the council adopted back in June of 2019. That's primarily what makes up that amount. In addition, it includes transfers to the vehicle replacement fund for the ongoing replacement of city vehicles, and it includes $250,000 on an annual basis in payments towards the city's unfunded retiree health obligation. So the good news for next year, revenues under expenditures and transfers out, we're looking at a surplus next year. Here again, these are preliminary numbers. We haven't even started the budget development process for next fiscal year. But at this point in time, things look encouraging for next fiscal year. Going beyond the upcoming fiscal year, things look to turn with the growth in expenditures, as I mentioned, outgrowing the growth in revenues. In order to fully fund the general fund expenditures that were identified in the capital improvement program, the adopted capital improvement program, it's about $1.5 million. $1 million in available resources to fund that. We'd be looking at a shortfall of about $457,000. That would be funded at this point in time from supplemental reserves. As you notice on the bottom line, the reserves stay above the 20% reserve policy until we get out to fiscal year 2024, assuming there's no other planned use of those reserves. Any questions? All right, so next what I want to, well, let me back step here. So this is labeled the status quo scenario. A couple of the basic assumptions that are built into here. Based on life as we know it today, life looking down 5 years, known or expected impacts on the operating side of the budget. Regarding key revenues, it assumes property tax growth continues in the range of 4 to 6%. Historically, other than during the recession, almost essentially every year property tax growth exceeds 4%. The past 3 years we've seen 6 to 8% growth in property tax revenues, so we're projecting 4 to 6 in the 3 out years of the projection. Sales tax revenues have been projected out at 2.5% annual growth each year going forward.
How much? Sorry.
2.5. All right, so I've prepared just an alternative scenario. I'm calling it a recession scenario. What this is intended to represent, it's not intended to be the crystal ball. This is exactly what we're expecting. What it is intended to do is acknowledge the fact that we are 10 years into an economic cycle without a recession. It's been more than 10 years since the end of the Great Recession. Typical economic cycles are 5 to 7 years in length. Typically, by the 7-year point, you can expect some type of an economic slowdown or even a recession. So what I wanted to present is what the impact would be, and this is what I'm going to call a mild recession. Under the scenario that is on the screen right now, in FY 21-22, sales tax revenues drop by 2%, property tax revenues go flat. They stay down there for another year before the recovery starts. As a point of reference, going back to the Great Recession from 08-09, sales tax revenues declined by 13% during that recession, and property taxes dropped by almost 9%. So comparatively, this is an extremely mild scenario, and we hopefully don't experience anything like that in any of our lifetime.
You see that happen?
Not that, something mild or something extreme.
What you talking about?
Something like this is entirely possible. Within a 5-year horizon, absolutely. So what I do want to point out is just the noted differences between the city's financial position between the status quo scenario and the recession scenario, starting with that third year, the FY 21-22. We could focus on the revenues over under expenditures and transfers out, right there in the middle. Whereas under the prior version, in years 3, 4, and 5, we're looking at utilizing reserves to the tune of about $457,927,945. Those numbers radically change: 1.2 million, 2.9 million, 3.5 million. So this isn't a prediction, but it's something we need to acknowledge as an actual potential. Okay, moving forward, I'd like to briefly talk about what's not included in either of those scenarios. And that is funding certain public facility needs that have been identified here in the community by community members, by the city. The first would be Fire Station number 4, the replacement of that 50-plus-year-old station. Estimated to be $17.5 million in total cost. The vision is hopefully being able to collaborate with the county on a public safety center. The amounts here represent the city's share of those costs if we're able to do so. $17.5 million project. If we were able to finance that project over a 30-year period, we'd be looking at about an annual debt service of about $1.1 billion. The community center, the good news is the capital improvement program anticipates full funding for the first phase of the community center in 2021. That would be for the teen and senior component of the community center. So we're hopeful that through the continued collection of our development impact fees and through putting together some other monies, phase one is funded. Phase 2, phase 3 is another story. The total cost for phases 2 and phases 3, which in general would include the gymnasium, the public event space. I think those are the key components of phases 2 and 3. The total cost for those phases is $32.3 million. If financed over a 30-year period, we're looking at a $2.1 million annual debt service. The library is another project discussed in the community. This assumes a 20,000 square foot library, estimated cost of $20 million. Might be a little on the high side, but for discussion purposes, using that as the point to focus on, that would be a $1.3 million annual debt service cost if we were able to finance that over a 30-year period. In addition to these projects, the Adopted Capital Improvement Program does identify other highest priority unfunded capital improvement program needs, about $24 million. Those primarily consist of investments in the paving, the street repair and rehabilitation, the CMP, Corrugated Metal Pipe Repair programs for projects such as that. All right, so I briefly want to talk about some of the things the city has done over the past couple of decades, couple of years. First, let me just set the table. If we go back to 1978 with the adoption the approval by the voters of California of Proposition 13, from that point in time forward, there have been a number of voter initiatives, there have been a number of legislative actions at the state level, a number of court cases that have enacted changes that have all, over time, made it more and more challenging for local government to control the revenues that they're able to raise. All for good reason, all with good intent, but the end result is the challenge to local governments is definitely there. You couple that with ongoing unfunded state mandates, the loss of development, the transfers of revenue by the state, which fortunately are pretty much done because there's nothing left for them to take. That's been the dynamic over the past 20 years.
Last words.
So, being faced with that scenario, that dynamic here over the past couple of decades, the city's been heavily economic development focused. Just one look at the town center, Trolley Square area, and see the transformation that's happened there, the great tax base, sales tax base, property tax base, the convenience for our residents and our citizens, of the shopping opportunities and restaurants that are there. All those have helped the property tax base and sales tax base and contributed to the city being fiscally solvent. Recent actions include the establishment of the Art and Entertainment District, which is hopefully going to be a launching pad for a different type of energy in town center. Also the branding campaign with the adoption of the new city brand and the logo, and the campaign that's going to follow that to get that implemented. Those are all good tools going forward to help the city in its economic development activities. Back in 2012, the voters of Santee approved a transient occupancy tax or TOT increase. Our TOT rate was increased from 6% to 10%. That was done here again on the heels of the Great Recession. In addition, January 2012, January 31st is the death date of redevelopment in the state of California. So in 2012, we brought this measure forward, the voters supported it. Our TOT revenues went from $115,000 prior to the increase. Currently, they're at about $575,000 per year. So it's a rate increase and also some expansion of the applicability of the TOT that has helped enhance that revenue stream. Franchise agreements, the city has been active in looking at its franchise agreements, looking for opportunities to help utilize those to assist the city. The most recent such action would be in the Cox Communication and AT&T franchise agreements, where we've now pulled the trigger on PEG fees. Those are going to provide about $150,000 annually in resources that will be used.
What are PEG fees?
Public educational and governmental fees.
Thank you.
The intended use or the required use is for capital expenditures, so that meetings such as this, the city council meetings, can be live streamed. We can upgrade the technology. We all struggle with these screens in here from time to time. The voting system, get the cameras in place so that we can live stream and effectively get what happens in this room with the city council meetings to the citizens and the stakeholders of the community. So that's going to relieve the general fund of having to come up with that money for those expenses. Excuse me. The city's been very active in cost recovery. Again, 2012 was kind of a benchmark year in that regard. The fee schedules in Santee hasn't been updated in about 20 years. At that point in time, we brought on a cost of services consultant and brought forward to the city council the results of that study. Bottom line, we were able to enhance cost recovery by about $450,000 on year on average by truly understanding the cost of the services to the community that we provide and making informed decisions on what those fees should be.
Tim, as you talk about that, I think that there's going to be an impact to people working in our community affected by that EB5, depending on how the lawsuit comes out. Because the question that comes up now is, all those people that now are going to be independent contractors, are they going to also have to pay our permit fees or business license fees?
Well, and the answer to that is, in some cases, if they're brought on board as an employee as a result of AB5, and that was the intended result of AB5, is to make sure that if people are actually employees, that they're hired as actual employees and not kept in the shadows as part of the shadow, or I can't think of the term right now, the workforce, without any benefits. Those that are then acknowledging their role in becoming legitimate independent contractors, it'd be impacted in Santee much less than any other community. Our business license fee is a fee-based program. All it does is charge to businesses the cost for us to manage and implement the program. So I believe our new business license fee is $88, and that includes $4 of that goes to the state of California. Annual renewals of $35.
What made me think of that is because the guy cuts my hair. There's like 6 people working in the barber shop, and all of them now are going to be independent contractors just renting a space and paying all their own bills, their own, Social Security, everything, all the roll-ups that go along with being. So then each one of those persons in there, you would think, would require a business license.
Correct, and they would. The good thing, as I mentioned, though, Santee is a business license fee and not a business license tax, which we'll talk about later. More than half the cities in the county actually have a business license tax. So sole proprietors, such as what you described, Mayor, would be subject in most other jurisdictions in the county to a business license tax typically based on a percentage of gross receipts. Here, they paid just the basic fee for the cost of the
Good.
program.
I just hate penalizing people because we have a road assembly member who gets a lot less.
Understood. In the area of cost recovery, another thing Santee does is we look for opportunities internally. So we actually recover about $1.3 million back to the general fund from special funding sources. We make sure that the capital improvement program carries its way. The engineers, the inspection staff that work on those projects, if the project is funded with development impact fees or other special revenue funding sources, we make sure that those projects reimburse the general fund for the staff time and the cost incurred, the actual cost incurred. It's about $1.3 million in total recovery to the general fund on an annual basis. And shifting to the expenditure side of things, Santee has a long demonstrated history of managing a tight budget in the good times and the tough times. Everybody pulls back when the going gets tough and the economy does a downturn. The real test in my mind is what does a public agency do when the going is good and the money's flowing. Santee's been responsible and not gotten ahead of itself, not overextended, not overhired, not expanded the organization unnecessarily so. It's been responsible in that regard, so we're better able to navigate things when things go south. Budgets are always in balance. We have tight budgetary controls. You notice we come forward every year at the end of the year, and there's always a positive story. There's money that's been saved at the end of the year, and that's going to be a given here. Other actions taken by the city are in the area of retirement costs, retiree health costs. The city, before the state required it, the city got out there and adopted a lower tier of retirement benefits for new employees, saving the city money increasingly over time. The retirement costs as well are being shared more so with the employees, not just shared, but the employees now are paying a portion of the employer's share of the CalPERS retirement costs. All employee groups in Santee are now doing that, starting this fiscal year. We've closed all the retiree health programs. There are just a couple of them here in Santee. They are not extravagant by any means. They're all closed to future entrants, other than there are 4 current employees that are eligible to roll into one program. That's it. The door is now closed behind them. The benefits have been capped. There's no future escalators. We've established a no-tax trust, as I referred to earlier in this presentation. And by doing so, in less than 2 years, we've actually reduced our retiree health unfunded liability by half, from over $4 million down to $2 million. So I'm going to turn over to Heather for a few minutes to talk about some of the things that the city can continue to do that we really have more control over.
Good afternoon. Next, we'll take a look at revenues that could be developed by growing the local economy. Revenue options, new business. Revenue options include annual sales tax revenue from new business that would generate the following sales tax amounts. A high-volume family dining restaurant could potentially generate $30,000 to $75,000 in sales tax. National supermarket chain, the potential is $50,000 to $80,000. A department store, $135,000 to $270,000, and a new auto dealership, $200,000 to $250,000. Property tax would also be a component of new economic development. The city receives approximately 18 to 20 cents of each dollar of the 1% base property tax levy. A new $20 million commercial building could generate $36,000 to $40,000 in annual sales tax revenue. Property tax revenue. More revenue options the city has control over are TOT revenues. A new hotel could generate $125,000 to $275,000 annually in TOT revenue. And the city, as Tim mentioned, we continue with our methodology of cost recovery. Later this year, staff will be bringing forward a recommendation to award a contract for a cost of service user fee study. It's important to note that because of the work that we did in 2012 and because of annual CPI adjustments, it will be less impactful than the original 2012 study. But still, it's good to go through the study and see if there are other options available to us. And then when looking around the region, there are other non-traditional options. The county is currently selling naming rights for some of their facilities. Currently, Live and Grow will be introducing digital billboards. So we're always open and interested in hearing new ideas.
I'm going to dive into the area of taxes, just provide information so we understand the nuances, the differences, what's out there, what's being done in the region. We'll go from there. So let me start by talking about the difference, the basic difference between a general tax and a special tax. It's going to sound extremely obvious when we say it. But a general tax is any tax imposed for general governmental purposes, as opposed to a special tax, which is any tax imposed for a specific stated purpose. Going back to the general taxes, to implement a new general tax, it requires a majority approval by a majority of votes cast on the measure by the voters. The general tax measure could be accompanied on the ballot. Many agencies do that. They accompany it with an advisory measure, which in effect seeks direction from the voters on the intended use. General tax measures can be initiated by city council action. They can also be done through voter initiative. Going to the special taxes I mentioned, any tax imposed for a specific purpose. The revenues from a special tax can only legally be used for this very, very special purpose for which it was implemented. A special tax measure requires the approval by 2/3 of the voters, 2/3 of the votes cast on the measure by the voters. Parcel taxes are a typical form of special taxes, and again, they can be initiated by city council action or by voter initiative.
So the following are some common general taxes, which should be noted that they can also be enacted as special taxes. The utility user tax, this is a tax imposed on the consumption of utility services, electricity, gas, sewer, telephone, cable television. Utility user taxes are commonly used throughout the state, most heavily used in the Bay Area and Los Angeles County. These days there are almost no new utility taxes. We do have one city in San Diego County, Chula Vista, that does have a utility users tax. As Tim mentioned earlier, kind of started talking about the business license tax. Santee does not have a business license tax. We currently have a business license fee. As he mentioned, it's based on cost recovery of the business license program. A business license tax would be leveled based on the percentage of gross receipts or the number of employees, type of business operation, or other factors. Slightly more than half of the cities in San Diego County have a business tax. There are a handful, like Santee, that have a business fee. There is a downside to the tax in that it can affect business location and expansion decisions. Then the cannabis business tax. There are different types of cannabis business entities. You've got retail, cultivation, manufacturing, and testing. In conversations with cannabis consultant professionals, and there are those things, cannabis consultant professionals, we are hearing that the production capacity exceeds the retail demand by 5 to 8 times. These businesses are heavily taxed, and they're in a tough licensing and regulatory environment. If the city did decide to consider a cannabis tax, it is estimated that Santee could support 1 to 2 retail outlets. The estimated revenue generated from one cannabis retail outlet would be about $140,000 a year. TOT taxes, Tim talked about that as well. In 2012, we increased our tax rate from 6% to 10%. This is in line with most cities in San Diego County as well as the state of California. And our current year projections are expected to exceed $575,000, which he also mentioned. The final general tax on the slide is an add-on sales tax, which Tim will discuss on the next few slides.
So let me start with just some sales tax basics. Statewide, the sales tax rate is 7.25%. Of that, 1% is allocated to the local jurisdictions such as Santee. That allocation is based on the point of sale, the point where the transaction is consummated, the sale is completed. In San Diego County, the base tax rate is actually 7.75%, which includes the half-cent transnet countywide tax. In 2003, California law was changed to allow counties and cities to seek increases in their sales tax rate. These days, it is on the local tax measure that you see. Currently, there are 217 cities across the state have actually implemented additional sales tax measures. 45% of the cities across the state. In San Diego County, 7 of the 18 San Diego County cities currently have additional sales taxes in place. We know Leavenboro has a ballot measure in March coming up, not included in that number, of course. So in implementing add-on sales taxes, they can be done as low as 1/8 of 1%, up to a maximum of 1%, in increments of 1/8 of 1%. There was only one city across the state that has the 1/8 of 1% sales tax. What's most commonly seen is the half-cent or the full 1-cent add-on sales tax. To date, 74% of the general sales tax increase measures statewide have been successful with the voters. So this slide summarizes the current add-on sales taxes that are in place in San Diego County. Chula Vista has 2 separate measures that were implemented, half-cent each. Del Mar has got a full 1% additional sales tax, as does National City. Mesa has a 3/4% additional sales tax, with El Cajon, Oceanside, and Vista having a half-cent sales tax in place. Many of them have expiration dates. You'll notice a couple of the more recently enacted ones, Chula Vista's Measure A and Del Mar elected to put no expiration date on their sales tax measure. All of these were done as general tax increases. None of them were done as special tax increases. And what's not on here is the El Cajon had the original half-cent sales tax for the police station and the animal control facility. That was a 10-year sunset. It actually fell off, I believe, in 2014. Any questions? All right, so point to make that the allocation basis for an add-on sales tax is different than the basic 1% local tax levy, local sales tax. It's allocated on what's called a point of first use as opposed to the point of sale. So it's the place at which the goods are actually put into use. Okay, so an example. Let me give a couple of examples that cut one way or the other way. A company such as HD Supply is a local sales tax generator here in Santee. They're the point of sale because their local facility is the point where online and telephone sales for those orders are finalized here locally. Thus it becomes the point of sale because it is the point of sale. If there was an add-on sales tax measure, you would realize little to nothing from what HD Supply generates because what they generate is being shipped to locations from their warehouses throughout the state, San Diego and throughout the state, mainly outside of Santee. So the reverse of that would be equipment sales, car sales, things like that. So new car sales, let's use that example. So Santee residents that currently purchase a car, if they go to El Cajon and purchase a new car, they don't pay the 8.25%, they pay the local 7.75% in Santee, because the vehicle will be registered in Santee, the point of use is Santee. If Santee was to implement an add-on sales tax, let's just say it's a half cent, for argument's sake, for discussion purposes, let's say they go to El Cajon again, the El Cajon tax is 8.25, but the Santee tax would also be 8.25. They would be charged the 8.25% based on the tax that's in effect here in Santee. If they were to buy a car in San Diego, which currently doesn't have an add-on sales tax, the transaction would look at the point of registration, which would be a Santee address, and buying a car in San Diego would trigger, if you're a Santee resident, you would still pay the 8.25 increase, the local sales tax add-on.
Tim, who determines what products are a place of use or
Well, so
just regular?
So to hopefully maybe make it more simple, the majority of your transactions are going to happen in Santee where the point of sale, the far and away, it's going to be where the sale actually happens. Where you end up with this distinction is where, really two main areas, where goods are being delivered. So if you make online sales, online sales is a perfect example. An online sales transaction the seller will recognize the sales tax rate in place locally. And there's certain requirements you're required to charge and remit a higher level of tax. Goods that are delivered, equipment sales, appliances, those types of things, where, say, you go to El Cajon and order something that's delivered to your home in Santee, buy a washer dryer from Best Buy. Currently, the delivery address is a Santee address. When that sale happens, they'll see the delivery address, and the local sales tax here in Santee is what they are required to charge, knowing where the goods are going to be delivered.
Gotcha.
So that comes into play with heavy equipment sales that are being delivered, things like that. So there are some nuances there. And the majority of the transactions are routine ongoing transactions at department stores and restaurants, and your traditional retail isn't affected by the distinction. But I did want to make sure to point that out so we get a clear understanding of what those differences potentially are.
Could change though with Grubhub and all that stuff. Buy a hamburger from El Cajon, you pay the tax in Santee or vice versa, right?
I'd be surprised if they're geared up to make those distinctions, but
I'm just pointing out the ridiculousness of it.
fair point. For discussion purposes, then, if Santee was to consider implementing a half-cent sales tax, it's a difficult estimate to come up with. We've had our sales tax consultant who specializes in this, run through the details of it, exactly what our current sales tax base is, and where our bleed is, where goods are being, new car sales, for example, which don't happen here locally. So they've looked at the regional numbers, they've looked at our numbers, and they've estimated that a half-cent add-on sales tax would generate about $5.1 million annually to Santee. We kind of take a step back and look at our current total sales tax, which is annually about $14.2 million, based on a 1% point of sale. And you cut that in half, $7.1 million, compared to what we actually realized, about $5.1 million. So we can't look at our current sales tax revenues, know that it's a 1% revenue, 1% local point of sale, take those numbers by half and assume that's what we would actually realize. So, questions? Okay, rolling forward then. I'm going to talk about some special taxes. Everything we've talked about so far on the tax side of things could be implemented as a special tax. Commonly, you see parcel taxes as special taxes, which are non-ad valorem property taxes, as opposed to something like a general obligation bond that we'll talk about in a moment. Non-ad valorem means it's not based on the value of the property. They're assessed based on a type of property use. It's what's also called a fixed charge property assessment. CFDs, community facility districts, are a form of parcel taxes, of the tax. Parcel taxes are most commonly utilized for infrastructure and certain types of public services, such as public safety, recreation programs, parks and open space maintenance, flood and storm drain system maintenance and protection. So something that's familiar to most of us here then would be the fire benefit fee. Technically, it's called the Santee Fire Suppression Availability Charge. This is a form of a special tax. It is a parcel tax. It was approved by the voters of the Santee Fire Protection District back in 1980. It's assessed at the maximum amount, $41 per residential unit, $492 per commercial or industrial building. When implemented, those were the caps that were put into place. There's no CPI escalator. The residential assessment has been at the maximum amount since 1993. The commercial assessment has been phased in different ways. I don't know if you recall, but we actually did a parcel audit, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, and we did a phased-in implementation to ensure that this was consistently applied for commercial industrial buildings. We phased that in over a 3-year period, I think in 15, 16, 17. Point being that all commercial industrial buildings are being assessed at the maximum $492 per building. Generates $1.1 million in annual revenue to Santee, but the point to make with that is that the only growth in that revenue source is the growth in new development, new residential units, new commercial industrial buildings. Otherwise, it stays static at the current level. Okay. Looking at general obligation bonds, we talked about public facilities. General obligation bonds are a mechanism that can be used for the acquisition or improvement of real property. Cannot be used, the proceeds from a general obligation bond cannot be used for the maintenance or operation of those facilities. They are repaid for an increase in the ad valorem property taxes assessed to all property owners. So it's an additional layer onto the property tax rate, if you will, instead of the 1% base property tax levy. And we all look at our property tax bills. The school districts have implemented a number of local special taxes that are on the tax bill as part of the additional tax rates that are assessed on the value of the property. That's what to repay a general obligation bond, that would be the mechanism there as well. A general obligation bond requires 2/3 voter approval, and the historical success rate is just under 50%. All right, briefly I'm going to talk about special benefit assessments. A point of reference for the council might be our landscape maintenance districts, the Santee Rotary Lining District. Those are special benefit assessments that are put into place when the concept of special benefit has been identified for a group of property owners. Typically they can define a neighborhood or a geographic region. General benefits that are provided have to be financed from other funding sources. So to implement a special benefit assessment, the revenues can only be used for those that are directly benefiting from these specific services to which the assessment is put into place. I want to put that out there as one more area. This has not been a 100% discussion on the world of what's out there, but I think we covered a lot of territory on what's out there. And at this point, I want to just open it back up to the council for, or through any speaker slips for continued discussion. Looking to hear from the council, get your thoughts, figure out next steps going forward.
How about if we go ahead and hear from the public first, and throw things around there.
We have one speaker, Janet Garvin.
Okay.
Janet Garvin. This is old stuff, but I just want to reiterate that it's not an answer at all, but I would want to discourage that we look at sprawl growth as an answer to income source, because it's been shown in the literature that sprawl growth, while it does provide income on a short-term basis, it doesn't provide long-term, it doesn't pay for itself on a long-term basis. And I would hate to see us in a position where on a long-term basis we're in the same position that we are now, trying to pay for infrastructure and maintenance that we caused to be there by having sprawl growth such as Bonita Ranch. I do think, I like the idea of having a lot of growth in the center of town, and I see that there's a lot of opportunity for expansion of business within the center of town, and I do think that the city could tolerate a half-cent sales tax increase, and I think that would provide a lot of income and could be tolerated very well in the city, and would be a great benefit to us, and would not require sprawl growth. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Great, thanks. All right. Council comments? This you want me to go first or last? Tell you what, here's my thought on a lot of this. I think that we have a lot of stuff in the pipeline right now that's coming. We have to be very, very careful about. We talked about a 26% reserve funding, and I know there's been discussion in Sacramento about mandating what reserve funding is. I don't know if you've heard the same thing or not. I heard it could be as low as 15%, and that if any municipality or county has more than 15% reserve funded, the state's going to take that money from them as a penalty. So nobody should be really surprised about that. So I think we need to be careful about that. Maybe we could look at, I'd like to be able to preserve some of that, find a way to maybe even create a dual track reserving for like infrastructure needs, capital improvements, things of that nature. The other stuff is the rainy day stuff. And of course, that means just about anything. I'm not particularly fond of raising taxes. I think as long as the other cities around us continue to raise their sales tax, and we can, get people out here to buy cars, I think we'll probably do fairly well. But I think the biggest thing for us is to continue to create business opportunities in Santee, whether it's manufacturing or other types of industrial, because then we can keep people working in and living in Santee. I know that's a lot easier said than done. Unfortunately, yeah. But I think that there could be some interesting prospects in the biotech industry and the artificial intelligence industry, whatever they call themselves nowadays, so to speak. And so I know that as far as retail goes, I know we have a lot of retail here. We have a lot of, restaurants, fast food restaurants. I like for us to continue to look for other types of restaurants other than fast food. When I look at the numbers on the types of, revenue that comes from restaurants, I think we could probably do a little bit better in that area. We have vacant land, we have people that want to build in the town center area, so, maybe go with a full court press on that kind of thing, and they'll bring a lot better types of businesses. And, having said that, who really knows exactly what that looks like nowadays because of the way, online sales go and things. But I think that we have a smart crew here, and that we could figure that out and find a way to bring those people, those businesses here. So for me, it's about economic development, and that's what's going to help to solve some of our problems. We are going to have to unfortunately do some building here in our city as far as homes, because people have to live in those homes. You can't just build businesses and ask them to come from out of town because, then other areas are impacted also. So that's kind of my thought on it. Well,
So thank you very much for doing that, Tim. I know this is it's a lot of work that goes into all of this, and it's sincerely appreciated by all of us. The concerns that I do have are, as looking even further down the line, we've had these meetings. The unfunded liabilities continue to grow, not necessarily decrease. That's going into the future. That's a big part of why when you see the last line, or depending upon which model you look at, that negative starts getting bigger and bigger, and it gets bigger each year exponentially beyond that. Hence the reason for needing to, and I appreciate the pre-planning here. We do have to think 20 years down the line, not necessarily just right now. And as such, looking at what types of businesses are more online proof versus big box stores that we depended upon for a vast majority of our sales tax revenue. I think, we all know the Home Depot is one of the biggest things that's carrying the city. That and Costco are, I think, the two biggest. Roughly? Yeah, and there's reasons for that. I mean, Home Depot, you need to go get some wood to fix your home or whatever the case may be. You can't wait for that to be delivered several days later. But who knows how that goes down in the future. We've already seen companies like Walmart pull back from wanting to expand. Target is doing the same thing in a lot of communities, going to more of a target market because they're looking to online sales for the rest of the stuff that you don't need as quick. That's what the future holds for a lot of this. Restaurants, I agree with the mayor as usual, that real restaurants are a need that our community is looking for, not necessarily just fast food, but once again, this is also, we've discussed, food trucks are, becoming more and more predominant because the cost of the brick and mortar everywhere is there. It's just cost prohibitive for a small business to be able to thrive. If you're not some chain restaurant that has the ability to go negative for a couple of years until a clientele is built up and you can recoup your costs, it's very, very difficult for mom and pops to open up, especially when you're talking $4 a square foot because there's nothing available because we haven't built anything. And nobody wants to build anything if you don't have enough population to sustain that something. And it's the chicken or the egg. We get it all the time. It really is, but that is why cities do need to continue to grow. You've got to be able to manage that in a proper manner. I am not all about, I don't think high-rise, high density is something that, once again, 20 years down the line, ever tends to look really good. I understand that there's some mandates to it from the state, and they are what they are. We've got to do what we've got to do, but the reality is that the American dream has never been to own my own high-rise condo, or apartment. It's to own a home with a little bit of a yard where you can have the kids playing outside with a dog or a cat, whatever the case may be. I guess chickens in today's world. But doing those, that is the reality, and I think it's irresponsible to not plan for that as well, because that is what a community wants, and that's where you see the most pride of ownership is in the single-family detached world, and it's what it is in real estate. It's not me running these. This is just the way real estate's worked for forever. It's becoming more and more difficult to build in California. We know that. That's not going away anytime soon. It's becoming more cost prohibitive to build in California. I don't see that going away anytime soon. So it is going to continue to be more difficult to have housing. Hence the reason I think we will still see increases, even in recessionary or minor recessionary eras. I still think we're going to see larger than that, than a flat or stagnant. So I appreciate that number. I think that is, like you said, it's very conservative, and I think that's probably even more conservative than it needs to be. But the other side of that is sales revenues. I do see that possibly decreasing. All the different stats that you looked at, inverted yield curves, looking at every time that unemployment is at its absolute lowest level, the sharp jump up once it starts to fall. It takes a very long time for unemployment to get down low, but as soon as it starts to go the other direction, it is a very sharp jump to people being unemployed, and it happens very, very fast. And that's, so I do see people maybe 21, 22-ish pulling back greatly. Where I've seen manufacturing pulling back quite a bit as far as just packaging. Nobody's ordering boxes anymore. When people aren't ordering boxes, that means they're not shipping stuff. That means they're not selling stuff. Looking at all that, that's your indicators for 18 months down the line of what's going to be happening. So I like that we're looking for other revenue sources. Once again, with the mayor, I've never been tax your way into prosperity. I don't think that works. I think continuing to be proactive, being open to new business sources that come in, to the next trends of business sources that come in, providing one, jobs, but two, sales tax revenues would be great. And I don't know for certain what that is. I mean, I think you and I have always fought against dispensaries of any kind in the city, and I still continue to do that. And there's money there, and it's legal. I don't. Who knows? Maybe by the time we're done, that's something that's going to change here in Santee as well. But these are all things that we do have to look at, and look at real sales. You had mentioned that in that vein, though, that the production is a 5 to 1. Is that what you said? Oversupply.
5 to 8%.
5 to 8.
5 to 8 times.
Oversupply.
Correct.
So is that production or manufacturing? There's 3 different entities. There's production, manufacturing, and distribution.
Well, it's the cultivation and the manufacture.
Okay, so in both of those, so the only side that you're seeing that there was any growth potential that's being seen is in the retail sale itself?
Correct, and there's even some challenges there. There's people are pulling out of the California market, the high level of taxes. They're having a hard time. You hear me now?
There you go.
There we go. Okay. All right, so let me get my thought back. We're talking about the high tax level, state excise taxes of 15%, local excise taxes range from 4 to 8%. You're talking about almost a 25% tax on top of it. The talk or the chatter is that the illegal market, people are relying on the illegal market because they can get it cheaper. So there's some challenges even with the dispenser side of things. However, that is the one area where you've got the pent-up demand. The production's in place, so there is an opportunity on the retail endpoint distribution. There is an opportunity there.
And that's the part I'm
3
most
years from now, who knows how that's
opposed
going
to, of course.
Who would have thought that by having those high taxes on them would drive up the market for illegal sales?
Everybody. Everybody that looks at economics in any form or fashion. All right. So, anyways, I'd love that if we do, as the mayor was stating, if there is some sort of push from the state of California to yet again look for ways to reduce our funds that we have available. Keep in mind, remember when the corrugated metal piping started to go bad and we needed money to fix stuff like yesterday because sinkholes were starting to form and that type of stuff? That's when those reserves are sincerely needed, and thank God we have the ability to go to it. Getting down to 15% scares the hell out of me, but if that's where it's going to be, I'd rather see any overage that we have being used to reduce our unfunded pension deficits, because that's what we're paying interest on top of interest on that basically, and that never makes economic sense.
Negative amortization on the
Yeah.
pension liability.
Yeah, exactly, and try and get that more in control is one of the best long-term financial decisions. It's not the fun stuff, it's not the sexy stuff, it's not the thing we can go, hey, we put that new road in, but it is what will ensure that the city of Santee is still the city of Santee 30 years from now, rather than watching that deficit get larger and wondering even further how we're going to fund this. So I've said enough, thanks.
Before you go on, have you heard anything on the discount rate being changed to 4%?
No, I haven't. There's the daylight out of me.
You know what, after we've had some discussion, maybe we circle back around and you can explain why that is such a scary thing, because when I was up in Sacramento last week, there was some discussion about that. And if that happens,
Remember when it was 8?
Yeah, well, so let's circle back around after we've talked, and so
Good Lord.
if that goes there, then we got other problems. Okay.
Most of the cities in California, if they did that.
Well, Steve?
Sounds like lots of possibilities from Sacramento coming down here, but I guess we got to deal with what we see before us. So, could we go back to the general fund projection status quo scenario? That slide. So that's our best scenario compared to the recession scenario, obviously, right? So so we're looking at, so what I see, there's revenues of $46 million. Right, expenditures, so 44, and so it looks like we actually are a little bit over this year. So out of the each of these fiscal years, we're already actually overspending in 4 out of the 5 years. It looks like, just based on your projections.
When you roll on the capital improvement program and fully fund what we've identified for the general fund.
But we've done this, and so that's what's happening. And how many? So we're going to get to that 15% reserve threshold relatively quickly anyway, regardless of whether Sacramento changes that. Have you done any projections further out beyond fiscal year 23-24 to see when that reserve begins to diminish more greatly, or does it accelerate? We're looking at, so it goes from 25 to 23, and then it looks like it's going down by upwards of 3% per year, maybe, starting in fiscal year 21-22. So we're looking at six cycles to be to 0, maybe, if it went down by 3 each time.
Well, of course, we wouldn't bring forward budgets that look like this, we'd make the changes and do what we needed to do.
So, but the status quo scenario takes us to 0 in 2030?
Based on these numbers with no other changes on the expenditure side.
So if we do nothing and just keep doing what we're doing, then we get to 0 in 2030? And then, so what's the consequence of being at below 15 or below 20? So we're below, because 20 is mandated, or 15 maybe soon.
The 20% is the city council's adopted reserve policy. It's not a statewide requirement, but it's a prudent place to be. I mean, the consequence is when you get to this scenario, that's, to me, the consequence. If you burn reserves down below the 15%, your ability to weather the storm. When the Great Recession hit, we had to do some major slashing of the budget. Revenues dropped dramatically. But we took a piece of the reserves and we used that. We had a planned use of reserves over a number of years to get us through to the end point. So if you get the reserves below a certain point, pick the number 20, 15, whatever that number is, you're just lessening your ability to weather this storm.
What's the state mandate for reserves?
There is not one.
There isn't one.
No,
Okay.
not currently.
So with status quo, we could potentially last through 2030. So we're looking at, so Lemon Grove was looking at the issues with the potential disincorporation. And so now they're looking at billboards. They're probably doing everything that they can at this point now.
Bake sales even?
Bake sales, well, hopefully that's not our big decision that we make today. So, but when does that scenario of disincorporation start to occur? How does that occur? If we didn't do anything, where do you get there? Is that when the reserve's at 0, or is that when we just say, oh, or we're just bankrupt? How does this work?
I mean, I can't answer the question because I don't think we'd ever get.
I know, but what's at risk?
City council or staff would ever let us get there.
Okay.
Well, the changes you have to make based on
the changes you have to make.
what you're faced with.
Okay.
So
As far as operating expenses or expenditures, so we're looking at that growing at about $8 million in expenditures, but we're going to be outpaced in our from our revenues. With I would say there's some efficiencies that could possibly occur within the operating expenditures. And we've already tried to maximize on that, right? So that's like our cost. So in the like say a scenario like when we were looking at forming a CCA or something of that nature, and say we had gone in that direction, potentially our electricity bill would be in our operating expenditures.
correct.
What's our electricity bill?
Yeah,
$600,000?
Yeah,
$500,000? What about our fuel budget? It's in operating expenditures?
yes, it is.
Okay. Well, I'd love to know exactly what those are for future, because I think that there might be an opportunity for efficiency there. Because I think there's probably maybe somewhere between $750,000 to $1 million worth of savings that could have occurred had we gone forward with the CCA or something of that nature, potentially. So I think that we should continue to look at, and maybe that's just one example, one possibility in looking at operating, operating expenditures and trying to, have be the most efficient and the most lean organization that we can be, and look at the financial implications of that. Because I know now that October has passed, but there's definitely another opportunity, and maybe had we had this information about these potentially catastrophic financial scenarios, maybe we could have acted in a more prudent manner, or maybe not. So, but let's look at the recession scenario. So it looks like the recession scenario has us dropping at a much quicker rate, potentially between fiscal year 21-22, upwards of 7% per year. So maybe that'd be so the acceleration of the use of the reserve would be doubled in this mild recession scenario, which is likely because we've had such a long period of economic growth. So potentially we could be in economic boiling water even quicker than 2030. I want to look at some historical data. And I want to I just want to say, and I want to compliment you, Tim, because you actually nailed all your numbers so well, because I actually figured I'd just keep the numbers in front of me. But you were able to put forth most of the numbers, unless you have them on your screen before you now. So let me get a quick drink here. So what I'm seeing here, so for over the last, this is like a 10-year statistics here you have. So in property taxes, we brought in $18.9 million. Is that
right?
$18.9 million in 2019. And sales tax revenue, we brought in 14.1.
Correct.
About 14. So so they're comparable to each other. Let's see here. So real property transfer tax. Could you give me a little bit of information on what that is?
Sure. Every time a piece of property is sold, there is a tax that's shared 50-50 between the county and the city. It's like 0.0055%.
So it doesn't bring in a whole lot, though.
No, it's not.
And then our special assessments, we've already kind of went over what those are.
So
So,
they're used for special
so just
specific purposes.
just under $2 million there. So that's, that's small potatoes. Franchise fees, we're looking at 3. TOT, $500,000. And then the gas tax, it looks like it unfortunately only gave us about $600,000 of the $1 million we might have been hoping for. It looks like we were at 1.5, and then for 2019 you got 2.1. Does that sound about right?
2.1.
2.1. So what I think is interesting is, so looking at in 2010, our sales tax revenue was about $7 million. And so between 2010 and then coming up to 2019, we doubled. We actually doubled our sales tax revenues. So I'd say spectacular. But I mean, there's been growth there and done quite well. Quite the opposite of what I heard in some previous comments about sales taxes. But yeah, and in fact, it looks like one of the greatest accelerant was between 2018 and 2019. So it looks like we were up by $1.4 million. So that must have been a nice windfall for you to have seen. So what I also find interesting is our property taxes. So I thought that those would have went in a different direction, but it looks like our property taxes were almost $23 million in 2010, and now in 2019 they're 18.9. So what's the accounting for that?
Yeah, the anomaly is redevelopment. The loss of all redevelopment money.
So a massive drop from 2011 to 2012, and then we've been
dissolved January 2012. Yes.
So, but it doesn't. I think we've grown there as well, and it seems to me that we have. Yeah. So we've definitely we've maximized a lot of the property tax. Now, as far as so what property taxes? So I think that's interesting too. So what are the property taxes? So we're looking at so residential. We're looking at almost $5 million potentially in residential property taxes came in 2019. But when I look at commercial, we only had about $650,000. Is that what it is? This is in thousands, but is this in millions, or it's definitely not billions? But I think it's mislabeled here.
Property tax, or you're looking at valuation numbers?
Oh, the valuation. So that's the assessed value. So the value's in billions. Okay.
Right. Yes,
So in commercial, so it seems like we have a huge amount of value in property taxes coming from residential, but in commercial and industrial, it just seems like we haven't grown nearly as much.
We're over 70% residential.
We're over 70% residential. So, when I look at those, when I'm looking at that, it seems to me that I think that the commercial and industrial side definitely is where we need to be focusing. I appreciate the comments coming in about from the audience about sprawl growth. We do need to grow. However, it's my understanding that for every dollar that is put into development, it costs about $1.10 to $1.40 for the city to manage that debt and to maintain that infrastructure. So although growth is good and we want to grow, I think that we do have to have concerns about kind of kicking the can down the road with that sort of development. So I do appreciate those comments. I think that if through residential growth, if that's all we needed, we wouldn't be having this problem now. So I think we need to diversify what we're doing, and so that's why I think I'm looking at the commercial and industrial. Specifically, I think the Prospect corridor is it just looks like a big storage area for steel. So I think that there's opportunity there. Now, going back to the this recession scenario, so which areas of where's our greatest vulnerabilities if we were to look at so versus our property tax versus our sales tax or whatnot, all together, or where do we take the biggest hits?
Well, I think sales tax we're more exposed. We've talked about some of those dynamics, you know, with the changes in the retail market, online sales, the way retail is done, buying habits, dining habits. There's a whole demographic type change that's occurring.
So if there's a recession, the area that is at the most risk is the sales tax.
I think so.
So that's where we would lose our most money and have our greatest.
Yes.
Like in 2010 and 11 and
Correct.
12, the number was way low. Yeah, okay.
So it seems like also knowing that, then that might be my biggest concern of where we have our biggest vulnerability, because we can't, if there's a recession now, we don't have any control over that. That's just the way the market is. So I think that's just something that should definitely be under consideration. Now let's see here. TOT. So we're looking at so there's a half $500,000 is coming in TOT. If we added another hotel, we're looking at potentially increasing that by another $250,000. So maybe that helps also somewhat, you know, with the potential savings in our fossil fuel and electrical bill. I don't think franchise fees are going to, well, that's going to increase slightly, right? With so what exact it's going to go down?
It's probably net par almost. We're going to lose on costs, but we're going to probably gain on.
So we're not going to go anywhere with franchise
It's
fees.
funny that it's not a high growth area because of the loss of.
And it's so small. It's so small. Well, I think the business as usual status quo is going to hurt us badly. I think we need to look to definitely have to look to efficiencies. We have to look to things like creation of the CCA. I think we need to focus on commercial and industrial development. I think as well as residential, but as far as that, I think we need to look at the potential for focusing on infill versus sprawl. I think that that'll give us a smaller footprint of infrastructure that we have to maintain over time, and I think that is important. I don't want us to be increasing our debt load for the future, because likely what's happening here is we're dealing with the credit card from our past. Everybody who's ever worked here, everybody's unfunded pensions and everything that's come to the city before us. But as far as before disincorporation, I would be open to doing whatever it takes to keep Santee from being disincorporated, and I would not allow, just like you said. Although I think that status quo could lead us that way, and at this time I don't think that aside from a CCA, I think that's about and efficiencies. That's probably about as far as it's going to go with this council. So thank you.
Thanks. I want to make one thing clear, though, if I can. I don't think we've ever talked about disincorporating here or going bankrupt. So, I mean, is my recollection correct on that? Okay, thank you.
Well, I think this is the time to be talking about it, just because we need to look at the economic reality, and also, you know, I would have some concern of our staff, you know, seeing that economic reality. If we don't act and if we don't look at that, we could lose people who are excellent and have been extremely efficient over time. And so, it is an economic reality. And unfortunately, 2030 is only 10 years away, and so time, it could travel very quickly. And it's only a few election cycles away.
Well, I mean, I'm hoping that, the way I'm looking at this is I'm seeing a lot of tax information here about doing a tax increase, and I just want to remind everybody, MTS is planning a half-cent sales tax on this ballot, and Sandag's planning in 2022, I think it is, planning a half-cent sales tax on theirs, and there's everybody, the answer seems to be, let's throw a sales tax increase on everything. And it's just not, sooner or later, people are going to get tired of this. I was surprised Chula Vista passed theirs, frankly, and a couple of these others passed them, but I don't think that's the answer right now. I think if we finally get into the answer of where we are in the Lemon Grove situation, then yeah, maybe we need to look at it. But right now, it's like, we need to get ambitious and, maybe go after more sales tax increases and maybe get that auto dealership that we keep talking about, maybe getting that extra hotel we keep talking about, maybe getting the theater finally in here, which is more, and some good restaurants, and, make this the place to be. That's what we're trying to do right now. And I think we just need to keep working the way we are on it. Yes, there's a lot of money coming out. Yes, there's a lot of money going, but that doesn't mean we can't change that budget. Stephen did have a good point about the, if we have to do the CCA, and I'm not saying we don't want to, we just don't want to do it on the city of San Diego's dime. That's our problem with it. And then we also don't want to do it on a bunch of liberal cities on the coast. So we're going to make sure that when we do this, we do it where we're not losing it in the long run. And if we can do solar and cut the costs here in the county, or in the city, that's fine. Let's do those things. So I don't disagree with what he's saying there. I agree with what the mayor is, but we don't. Let's keep working on what we have and keep working on what we can do, and maybe try and get a little more ambitious on trying to get some of these, maybe an auto dealership in, and maybe we were talking about going to Las Vegas to really try and push these people to get in here. If we have to go up to Stater Brothers and say, hey, Stater Brothers, come on down, let's do it. If we have, let's start getting aggressive rather than, let me send an email, and let me do this, and let me do this, and nobody does anything. All we get is an email reply back, thanks for your email. Sometimes, we don't even do that. So I think we need to really start working on trying to get some big businesses in here that people want to come to. They want to come to Santee already, where my motto was, Santee is where East County shops, because people are coming down from Campo, they're coming from Alpine. Let's get some businesses here where they want to hang out here. I want El Cajon is really moving business right now. They're giving it away, but let's make sure they do it. They've got car dealerships coming in. They've got really nice restaurants coming in. How do they get them? What are they doing that we're not? Why are they going to El Cajon and not Santee? And so let's work on that a little bit more. And let's work on, maybe trying to work on some of these budget issues. Maybe we just have to cut back on some of the CIP programs. Maybe we have to do some of this stuff, but, I don't see it being that, short of the recessionary one, I don't see it really being that bad right now, but we can't control it. We can't work on it with a little aggression. So let's just, everybody else has said their version, so it's fine.
I do want to clarify one thing. We go to Las Vegas, it's not to gamble. We actually are going there for a purpose. We're actually members of the International Council of Shopping Centers. Having said that, shopping centers are a wide variety of types of businesses, not just more restaurants, although they do, push a lot of them there. But we've been very assertive over the last at least 20 years or a little bit longer. Pam, when did we start going to ICSC? Was it about 1998?
That was it exactly. And then we started exhibiting with a booth in 99 and had a booth right up till 2011. But that was when we lost.
In 2010, the chamber joined with us. And that was our first, I think it was 2011, the chamber joined with us And we actually brought in 6 or 7 or 8 people to go up there and walk, basically walk the streets, because it's 1,000 booths, I think. It's a 5-mile walk.
Yeah, it's pretty intensive, and quite frankly, I hear people around the county ask, how is it you do so well on a lot of what we do? And it's because we do educate not just our staff, but our council, and what some of the things mean when it comes to economic development and businesses. So that's what Ron's talking about when he says, well, let's go to Vegas and bring some business, and we're not going to bring gambling. So I just wanted to clear that up in case somebody wondered what you were talking about. So, some of the things that we have to look at is that in 2007, 8, 9, and 10, there was a huge downturn in the economy. Not only one reason why we had lower property tax increases because the assessor started reassessing property and giving discounts. And so once that turned around, then there were more homes coming and being sold, and even the ones that, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but some of the homes that were real estate owned that were turned over, and they were reevaluated once again, and then we got a higher property tax on them. So there's a lot of reasons why I think property and sales tax has doubled over the years. What we have to do is continue to find a way to make sure that they continue to grow. I think with the Wayfair decisions, things like that, you kind of mentioned that they are going to continue to grow for us. We just don't know what that is going to look like for sure. Maybe what we could do is look for more online businesses to bring here, warehousing even, where they sell from. And so I don't want anybody to think that we're going to do things in a status quo fashion. We're going to continue to think out of the box. We're going to go after business, industry, or whatever it takes. And we're going to partner with those that can help us to get there. And so, we are continuing to have unfunded mandates by the state of California. And the state of California doesn't increase their tax. And the reason why they don't increase their tax is because they don't want anybody to think they're the bad guy. But what they do is they go and they continue to take money from counties and cities and special districts so that they have no choice but to raise the city taxes, raise their franchise fees, and raise whatever other means they have with their membership or clients to get money. So it puts it on us to be the bad guy. And so it's our job to fend that off as long as we possibly can. And I think that we're doing a good job of that. We're going to continue to raise our revenues. We're not going to remain status quo, so I don't think I'm worried about what it's going to look like as far as bankruptcy in 10 years, because we will have an answer way before that. But we just can't sit there and not do anything. Otherwise, we will be in that situation. So, before I have Marlene kind of wrap things up for us, can you tell us about this discount rate and what all that means? Because so many people don't understand that, and Rob mentioned, it was 8% at one time. And then, but it seems like even though it gets lower and lower, we still pay more and more. So, so that we need to have a little bit better understanding of that.
So the discount rate is the assumed rate of return on the retirement plan assets. And the recent dynamic that's playing out that's responsible directly for the annual $400,000 to $500,000 increases each and every year, one on top of the other, in our retirement costs, is the reduction in the discount rate, or the assumed rate of return on retirement plan assets, only from 7.5% down to 7.0%. Just going from 7.5 to 7.0 is adding the magnitude that I just described. I've heard the talk initially of 6.25 or maybe 6%. I haven't heard of the 4%. Even the 6.25 makes me more than nervous.
Yeah.
I mean, if it needs to be, it needs to be. If it's based on a true long period of time, actual experience and looking forward at, what the expected rate of returns, then of course you have to make corrections somehow, some way.
So if I understand this right, the discount rate or the expected rate of return is, let's say, in easy numbers. Let's say they expected to make $10 million in their investments, and they only make $750,000. Then we have to come up with the other 200. Yes, $7 million.
Correct.
So because they didn't do their numbers right, because they didn't make as much as they wanted to.
To CalPERS' credit, I mean, a lot of what we've been squeezed with over the last 5 to 10 years has been them tweaking the actuarial assumptions. They're getting it better over time. Unfortunately, they got it wrong for too many years on the front end of that, and now we're paying the price to try to get it back on track. So they've shortened the amortization periods, which means if you have the year where there's a huge disparity between the assumed return revenue and what actually comes in, instead of kicking the can 30 years down the road, it only gets kicked 20 years down the road. And that's to the benefit of the retirement system. There's no practical way that you could, in 1 year, have to make up if there's a shortfall in 1 year that, hey guys, pay it all the following year. Cities couldn't do that. They can't plan, they don't have the resources. So squeezing the amortization period from 30 years to 20 years is a tool that CalPERS has properly implemented. It's the right thing to do. It's just one more pressure point on the system.
Okay, that helps a little bit there. Thank you. I know there's a lot of people probably watching and goes, what are you talking about? But this is important to understand, that we're making up for their deficit. And the fact is, they don't always use up very good practices to make their investments. So, anyways, Arlene.
Okay, council members, the point in today's discussion is a workshop scenario. We wanted to present to you a variety of ideas. And yes, there's a lot of information about taxes in the presentation because many communities in California either have them or they're looking at them. Imperial Beach just hired a consultant to go look to see, would their community be interested in it. We know Lemon Grove has one that's in process by a citizens initiative. We understand from previous discussions with council that that's not necessarily a high priority with you, but there are citizens in the community who want to understand the difference between those scenarios. So that's why we wanted to make sure to get that out there, because it is a source of revenue that is a possibility. At the same time, what we hear the council saying today, and I want to speak to a couple of points that were brought up, the CCA is not an if and when. That is a requirement based upon the Climate Action Plan, the Sustainable Santee Plan that was just adopted. The city will be looking at a CCA. There are a lot of other expenses that go along with the Climate Action Plan, but the CCA is an opportunity. Kathy Valverde has been working on that. We are still in discussions with the county. And the goal at this point is to bring this city council back a CCA that can be implemented at the end of 2020 that will go into the 1 year of the implementation plan review with the state, so we can actually see that in 2022. That's our goal. I can also tell you that both, if I understand correctly, Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, but both of the CCAs the city had an opportunity to join have been delayed. They are not being implemented in 2021 because SDG&E cannot provide the appropriate billing cycles for them to make that happen. So while we did not implement as soon as many in our community wanted to, there's not a delay for us, because even if we get it going in this current year, which is the plan, hopefully we'll be able to be on the same timeline and implement it along with the other communities at the same timeline. So there are some benefits to that. There are some opportunities in looking at solar projects, electricity, fuel costs are things that we'll be looking for. There's a requirement to look at electric vehicles for the city fleet. So the scenarios that you see don't include all of those options because we just don't know how to plug those in yet. and many of them may take a little longer than a 5-year timeline to be able to implement. But those are things that the city staff are going to be looking at going forward. There was a question about residential versus commercial. In most of California, as the community and council know, there's a big push to build additional housing. We've been dealing with that just like other communities. Housing traditionally does not pay for itself, that is true. Even if you factor in some of the other benefits that go along with the construction there. But that is also why the city did what it did with the Weston project, and we implemented what's called the Community Facilities District that helps offset the differential between what the property tax and estimated sales tax and other revenues that would benefit the city differentiate between the cost of providing services to those communities. So that's all in the negotiations with new development on a large enough project. You can't implement a CFD on small projects with 3 to 4 units, 8 to 16 units, even up to a couple hundred units. There's not enough critical mass there to implement a CFD, and that's where you have problems. It's easier to implement a CFD on a larger project. Discussions of sprawl aside, it's easier to implement a CFD on a larger project where there's actually a critical mass enough that can spread those costs and be able to fund them. So regardless of the politics in that discussion, we just want to get that detail out there for everybody.
Versus infills.
Right. So neither one or the other may be this council's preference, but in order to offset the cost of residential, it's easier to do on a larger project with a CFD or some other sort of financing tool. The other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is, yes, the city did do a lot with ICSC in past years. Recall that that was all funded by redevelopment. We don't have that tool anymore. That's gone. There was a lot of discussion regarding economic development, and the city does want to do that. We did implement the Arts and Entertainment District, which allows for us to focus on things that can't be done online. Things that you have to come to enjoy. Whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a hotel, whether it's miniature golf. I mean, you know, it's really difficult to do those kinds of things online. So we're trying to focus on the types of land uses that require people to be here. And we think that's a positive step that we have taken. There was some discussion about a grocery store in Stater Brothers. Pam and I know, Stater Brothers has looked at Santee. We don't get to control and force them to come. They have looked at various elements of the community and they've said there's not enough infrastructure in place. Some of the buildings around the vacant parcels are old and crummy looking, so to speak, in their opinion, and so we don't want to go there. We don't get to control our economic development future. We have to focus on that, but we don't get to control that. Auto dealers, I can tell you there's been at least one, if not two, that have looked at Santee. We don't have anybody who wants to sell the land to make a deal for an auto dealer to come here. The city also doesn't get to control that. We need a private party to be willing to sell their property and make a private deal. Nor am I suggesting that we want to get in the middle of that. We'd rather have the private sector handle those deals, but there are restrictions on how we can help make that happen. El Cajon is growing. El Cajon, I can tell you, has been able to implement and facilitate 90% of their building permits by mid-year. I was just at a meeting with a presentation by El Cajon staff. We hear a lot about traffic in Santee and please don't grow. We hear a lot about various areas of the neighborhood we don't want people to grow in because it's difficult. And staff understands it, I know council understands that. But a lot of the impacts we're getting are from people outside of the city limits of Santee that are growing. When El Cajon has 90% of its building permits issued by December, they're planning on a lot more building. That building is what encourages economic development. When they see high growth numbers in a community, retailers say, maybe I want to go there. As most of this community knows, Parkway Plaza is sort of an old dead shopping center, and I would rather come shop in Santee any day of the week than go to Parkway Plaza. However, with the closure of Sears, you'll know if you go to Parkway Plaza, the city of El Cajon has been entertaining home improvement and home amenities. They've got Ashley Furniture. They've focused all of those to go in the old Sears store. Why? because for retailers to come, it's easier to go in a vacant building than it is for them to build a new building. So you need empty buildings for retailers to look at. That encourages them to want to go there. So for the city of Santee to focus on that, we need to look at how do we reuse some of our vacant spots. We don't have a lot of them, and most of them are smaller locations. That doesn't mean staff shouldn't look at that or focus, and we hear council saying we want to do more of that. So we will continue to do that.
But just to interrupt, you know, this thing shows those items.
It does.
And so
And
when you're
most
saying,
of those
well,
are
we
going-
can't get
right
those
now they're
items, we
going-
shouldn't have put it in there.
Well, but that's some of the things that we want to make sure council understands, and the community understands as well. We need to be able to focus on some of those things, but they're not always easy. We need to be able to try some new tactics.
And the other side of that is, I'm sorry, Father, but some people think that you put in a auto dealership and that's $1 million a year to the city.
Correct.
Having realistic numbers is what we need, what everybody needs to see. The other side of that is, speaking of El Cajon, the way that they're getting some of these businesses in are by giving away the tax revenue that they get, which means there's no net benefit to the city of El Cajon to take care of their obligations. We need, well, we're talking 20 years down the line. So we need to be smart about that and partner with businesses, but not give away the farm just to say we built something. And it'd be great to expand our business side, but as you stated, the reality is businesses have to want to come here. There have to be people for them to want to come here, and there has to be land for them to be able to build on and do what they need. The city of Santee does not own land. It's not owned by Santee. We don't have any control over it. It's owned by private citizens, corporations, and the county. If they can't make deals, we have no say-so. All we have the ability to do is state whether or not the business is permissible or if it's in the correct zoning. We don't have the ability to state that you must bring, oh God, what's the one we hear all the time now?
Trader Joe's.
Trader Joe's, thank you. I can't tell you how many letters I got, and you must bring Trader Joe's into Santee. I elected you, you bring in Trader Joe's. I'm like, wow, if I had that ability, we'd have had a Trader Joe's and a Bass Pro and Cabela's and all that stuff a long time ago. It's not the reality.
You don't have a magic lamp?
Unfortunately, I don't. And then talking about prospects, that's, once again, it's all great and dandy, but that's all private land. We can't force somebody to give up the land that they've had for generations sometimes if they don't want to sell.
I would agree with you, Councilmember. There are things that we can look at to try to help that, like the Arts and Entertainment District, putting other sorts of overlays, making things easy, but we can't, in the end, we don't have final say-so or control over those issues. It's my job to give the good, bad, and the ugly, and one of the things I do want to remind the council about is, I know, it's my job, hate the messenger, but here we go. There are a number of facilities that this community has asked, and they have begged for a long, long time. And part of this presentation is to allow people to understand why we don't have some of those things. El Cajon had a special tax that they put in that built their new police center and their animal shelter. It expired, it's done, but they still have a separate general sales tax in place. And that is assisting them when they get these other businesses coming in, they're getting a little bit more out of each one of those retailers than we currently would get. So that is just a fact of the matter as things sit right now. One of the other things that we need you to understand is just in the last 48 hours, effectively, I had a conversation with the San Diego Sheriff's Department. The public safety center that the city has talked about along Magnolia with the Sheriff's Department and our fire department. A lot of people told me 3 years ago, well, that will never happen, it's not going to happen, it's number 20 or 25 on their list of infrastructure. That project has been moved up. We told you during your workshop last March it would be moved up to position number 3. Right now, they're looking to buy the land for that center in next year's fiscal budget for the county. They have to buy it from themselves, which is interesting because they already own it, but one department needs the money, so they buy it from them, so they trade the money back and forth. Regardless, yes. But regardless, that transaction is going to occur in 2021. And the animal control unit of the County of San Diego, who we are no longer contracted with, we probably have the Humane Society for Service, but the animal control unit is looking at trying to build an animal shelter in cooperation with the Sheriff's Department. Staff said, we I don't get to tell you whether you get to do that or not, but we want our public safety center with a replacement for Fire Station 4. We want that on that site, and the Sheriff's Department wants it on that site. We are in conversation to try to make that happen, and it's been moved up significantly because the Animal Control Center, the Animal Shelter, Animal Care Center, needs to move immediately. They want to move that forward. In order for the city to be at the table, we have $75,000 that's budgeted for studies and analysis. But if you look at, in order for us to make that happen and be at the table fully, even if we built it out and we debt serviced it over 30 years, you're looking at $1.1 million. If I look at these numbers, that's 4 auto dealers. And we're going to need them within 3 years, 4 years. Those are the realities. To stay where we are, to help build that before the debt service, to get us the new fire station, and move these forward. So while that message is perhaps not what the community wanted to hear, it's probably not what council wants to hear, that's part of my job, is to balance out those messages and those details. We have an opportunity on that center, but we need to look at a way to raise the money for that debt service. And obviously, staff is going to negotiate that out to say, maybe we can push off payment for it for a few years, partner with the county and pay a little less at the beginning, pay a little more later. We are going to do whatever we can to make things work. The doom and gloom doesn't have to be absolute. That's not the point here. But this is a workshop, and we want to let the community know we're trying to look at all avenues that are available to us. And an emphasis on economic development is something that we do need to do. We have opportunities we're looking at for a hotel, for a theater complex. The theater won't bring us a lot, but there's a restaurant there, so we'll get something, and we'll get a little property tax off of that. But again, if you look at the value, there's a $20 million commercial building. That's about what the theater's going to be. There's about $40,000. You know, if we want to help with the public safety center, we need $1.1 million. $40,000 is not, it's not going to cut a chink in that. So we just want council and the community to understand those are the kinds of things that behind the scenes, the city council and staff are really working, trying to balance out. And we want to make that happen. But it may or may not be able to happen solely off of economic development by itself. We're going to be as creative as we can. We're going to do what we can. We don't get to control economic development, but I think we're doing a pretty good job of trying to balance out the issues. The mayor is well aware that East County has a really difficult time in bringing in industrial growth. The buildings here in East County are older. They're not the right size for some of the new types of industry. They don't have some of the infrastructure that new industry wants. So we have to work with our building community, our business community, on modifying those buildings, trying to bring them up to par with what we can be competitive with. But the question is, who's going to pay for the cost to make that happen? And that's difficult not only for Santee, but also for El Cajon, La Mesa, and a lot of the unincorporated area where you see some of the industrial pockets. We have a more difficult time because we don't have ready access to capital to make that happen. Life happens on the coast. It's just a reality. Doesn't mean we're not going to work on that, but those are the kinds of things that we deal with. When it comes to billboards, I know that the city had a proposal years ago to look at a billboard, and that was not thought of as an option for us. I can't comment on Lemon Groves because I know they're going down a different road than maybe we might want to do. But the city has an opportunity to put in a small billboard that is unique, that goes with our brand, not the over the freeway signage, okay? That was presented in the brand workshop. I don't think that's going to happen. That's not what we all want. But an opportunity to put up something on the freeway that advertises Santee and some of the businesses here. Small, you know, more aesthetically pleasing than, here, we're a giant auto mall, please come to visit us. That's not what anybody really wants, I don't think. But if we're thinking of ourselves as a business, and what we understand from Sanday and their studies are that approximately 70 to 75% of the traffic on Highway 52 is not coming to Santee, is not going from Santee, has nothing to do with Santee. If I'm a business and I'm trying to operate the city as a business, I'm saying that's a ready market to get customers to come to Santee, to help us improve our sales tax, to find out there's pads here to build, to find out there's options. So that will be something that we hope to look at in the future. Will it improve us from a financial viewpoint? I'm not exactly sure. We don't have a deal on the table like London Road does. But I would tell you that that is something that, from a staff perspective, we think might be something that could be an option for us to help advertise our businesses and pull some of that traffic that, let's face it, is sitting trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do today because I have half an hour to wait on 52. Let's give them something to look at. Let's give them something to think about. Maybe I should come back and hit a movie up in Santee. Maybe I should come back and hit dinner up here. Maybe I should get my kids off and go sign them up for a program at Sportsplex, whatever that might be. But let's use that signage opportunity to give them a chance to know more about our community and be a part of us. And that can help our economic development efforts. I think those were the major points that we heard from council today. Those were just some comments in response that we'll try to answer for you. Yes, while we are facing issues going forward, I think it would be hard to name another city other than maybe a couple of them in the state that aren't facing these issues. We're not alone, and staff is going to do whatever we can to assist the council and make sure that Santee stays a place that people want to be, in as much as we have revenue to support us. And we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. But it's our job today to give you, as I said, the good, the bad, the ugly, and to hopefully open some eyes to think about other alternatives based on timing of when revenues could be available and when we want to see revenues here.
It was interesting being out at the Olympic pre-trial this weekend. I was there for nearly 12 hours. And I can tell you, our staff, some of them were there a lot longer than that, so thank you very much for being there. I talked to probably more people on Saturday than I have in a long time. And there were a lot of people that came down from their homes in Santee, believe it or not. And many of them said, I didn't know this was going on. Unfortunately, the promoters didn't promote very well, but they were very surprised. But we talked about other things going on in Santee, like the Mass Park opening. There's a lot of people that want Mass Park to open because they like to go there, people that don't even live in Santee. I also talked to a lot of people that were not from Santee, that came for that pre-Olympic trial. And what happened is that these people came to our communities, they spent their money, and so those are the things that help us to generate extra sales tax also. Bill, your department does a wonderful job at promoting our city. Bree's not here, but she's undertaking some of the marketing also now in the city. She has a real gift of having worked in your department for a long time. And we continue to expect to see that. I mean, not because I'm telling you better do it or you're going to be out of here, but because I know that it's just inherent to what you and your staff do for us. So, the more we do like that, and I can tell you right now, people come here because, like for instance, they can come to our concerts for free. Well, they're not really free, but we do have great sponsors, and those are the people that want to do business in our community also. And the more that businesses out there know about that kind of opportunity and come here, maybe the bigger ones will be able to convince some of the aging out businesses that it's time to sell your business, sell your property, and that can be a great retirement system for you. And that's probably one of the ways that we might be able to turn over property. Other than that, Rob's right, you can't hold a gun to somebody's head and say, sell us your property or give it up. But I think we have great opportunity in the future. Our brand says that. As a matter of fact, I have heard a lot of comments about, wow, why isn't anybody else marketing the way you're marketing? And we've only been doing this for about a month. And people love the idea of do more, do east. And we probably will start convincing more businesses they need to do more, do east. I don't necessarily want to suggest they go to El Cajon to do more, or to Lakeside, or to El Cajon, or anywhere else. However, if they do, then it's going to help our entire region. But Santee has a lot to offer, and I think we're going to offer that. Staff, do you have anything else that you want to add to that? I want to thank Bill Pomerang and Alan Carlisle, who was here a little bit earlier from the Water District, for sitting in and hearing what we're talking about. Do you have anything to add or questions? Okay. Anyone else from the community have any last minute questions?
I have a question.
Can you please go to the microphone? And then we'll have to get a speaker slip after you're done.
I'll make it short so I don't pass out. So I hear a lot about growth and business growth, and I think there's a big, here we go, I think there's a big elephant in the room. In the past couple of years, there's been a couple of large places that wanted to come to Santee, and they've had a huge, difficult time coming, and with nobody in this room, but how do we tell people to come in to Santee when they see what's happened to other people trying to come to Santee? That's one of the things I think we need to address. Because, Carl Strauss should have been here years ago. And they planned a much larger project back then, from the information I have. And it was so hard for them to come to town. There's another project that's been going around social media that would bring a new hotel, an updated, cool place. And everybody's poo-pooing on that. And so I'm just wondering, we're talking here to bring people here. And then on the other side, people have a massive, hill to climb to bring anything here. So I wanted to mention that in a public forum because it's ridiculous. I come to all the meetings, I watch this, and we're here trying to get more money, but yet any time any large thing wants to come to town, they get put through the ringer. And I don't think those two things, go together. So I just wanted to say that out loud.
Great, thanks. Rob wants me to make sure that everyone understands it's not the council that's the impediment here. Although there are, everybody does have a legal right to, bring concerns forward in a legal way, we'll say. And we just have to deal with that. We have to find a way to deal with that. And if nothing else, to find a way to expedite the concerns when it is brought forward. So that's a very good point. So, all right then, if there's nothing else, we'll stand adjourned, or sit adjourned. If it's not.